So it's pretty dark in here.
Hey guys, I'm here at the Royal Greenwich Observatory Astrophotographer of the Year gallery. I came out in person to see all of the shortlisted images in person. So I figured I would take you guys through every single section and point out a couple of my favorite photos from each category. Starting over here with People in Space. This photo here by Hannah Rochford was one of my favorites. This is the moon rising in Glastonbury over this castle with a bunch of people in the foreground. This is in the People in Space section, so it kind of shows everyone hanging out together looking at the moon. But shots like this are kind of difficult to plan. People will typically use an app called Photo Pills and they'll figure out where the moon is coming up, but it's very critical on your timing and your location. You have to be at the exact right spot. So it's a lot of things that come together to make the shot work out perfectly. Usually people will come back over and over again to the same spot because they'll know where the moon is going to come up. But it's just a very pretty image. It's cool to see everyone together looking at the moonrise, because I know I've been there many times before. This image of the ISS and the moon from Andrew McCarthy. This is a really cool image. I'm not sure how he did it. He used a mono camera, but he's still got the nice colors of the moon and a very sharp ISS. It's a very, very good image, and it won for this category of the People in Space section. So very awesome. Alrighty, now onto the aurora section. So this is one of the biggest sections in terms of shortlisted images, but my favorites are down here. Obviously, the winner in the aurora section is one of my favorite ones. This was taken from Iceland by Philip Prebenda. Sorry about if I mispronounced that, but it shows a bunch of really nice ice crystals and just a really aesthetic looking aurora over a mountain. I really like it because I really enjoy the wide angles perspectives when people get low down on the ground with the ice and you can see the green light glistening through the ice, which is kind of one of my favorite types of shots of the aurora. So this one's really cool. You can also faintly see some methane bubbles coming up from under the lake, and this I think happens from decaying plant matter under the lake that causes these bubbles to come up from the surface, also giving it a pretty cool look. So very cool shot. My other favorite one in this section was the shortlisted image by Stephen Lieberman. This one's from Vestrahorn in Iceland, and it's just a really cool image. I think the aurora here, especially the magenta part, comes out a lot strongly compared to all the other images here, so there's like a wider range of aurora colors. And you gotta love the black sand from Iceland too in Vestrahorn. It gives a nice contrast to everything, but I just really like the shape and the color of the aurora in this one image. Alrighty, this is the skyscape section. So this is a set of images that are just the sky and landscape instead of something like People in Space where there's people. This one is just Earth and space. So this one has less images, but I really enjoyed this image up here by Abhijit Patil from Badwater Basin in Death Valley National Park. And this image is actually used as a lot of the banners and a lot of the marketing material for the competition as well. So this image is absolutely everywhere, but it's a very pretty image. The one thing I really like about it is the glowiness that he's achieved around the bright stars. It's a thing called the Orton glow. Some people either add it in through editing or they'll use a glow filter to actually make it pop. But I really enjoy it either way. It just adds a nice feel to the image. I try to add a lot of glow to my images like this, but you can also see a lot of cracked up salt from the lake bed in Badwater Basin. It looks very, very salty and dry and inhospitable, but very cool shot. My other favorite image in here, well, we should also talk about all the winners, but my other favorite image is Jihui Hu. This is Stabbing into the Stars from Tibet, and this is just a really cool star trails image. It's not like a usual star trails image where it'll be wide angle, but this is like more of a telephoto image. I'm guessing probably like 135 to 200 millimeters plus focal length. And that way you can see a lot more motion in the stars very quickly, but you can also see there's a lot of movement in the clouds in the snow-capped mountains. And it's just a very pretty shot. It looks like it was also captured during the moon. The moon adds a lot of light that normally like wouldn't be in the image, and it would just be dark. So you can get the atmosphere with the clouds and the snowy mountains as well. So this section here is just a big projector, and you can pull up any of the images from the competition on it. Boop. That's mine. That's my photo.
That's a good thumbnail.
Is it?
Yeah, just
Should I do the pointing finger?
no, I'm just gonna
All right. Hey guys, so here on the big screen is my image, which I captured that was shortlisted in the Nebulae and Stars category. This is the Crescent Nebula in Cygnus, and this is an image I shot with the 16-inch telescope out at Sierra Remote Observatories. And this was during last year in around summer, because it's in the Cygnus constellation, but it was a very, very highly detailed image of the crescent, and I hadn't seen any images before that had this level of detail. A lot of that is due to the fact that we had a couple spells of very good seeing in the summer. Yeah, we had many spells of good seeing during the capturing of this image, because it took about 45 hours of exposure. And yeah, we were using an active optics unit, which means we were guiding at a very fast rate. So sampling at like 0.2 arc seconds per pixel, it produced a ton of detail. The biggest challenge in this photo, and the biggest challenge in any Crescent Nebula photo, is, as I was saying, the biggest challenge is the blue shell at the top of the image. That's the oxygen 3 shell, so that comes from the ionized light from oxygen gas, a part of the nebula. And it's very faint in the Crescent Nebula, but it's kind of like one of the critical features that you need to pull off like a really good image of the crescent. So I spent quite a long time. I think the majority of the 40 hours, or about 25 hours, is spent just on oxygen to try to get the shell to pop out. And I also put in RGB stars for taste because it just looks better. It's kind of like a cherry on top to do RGB stars on a narrowband image like this. But for the color, this is a HOO image, so I only shot, well, I did a little bit of sulfur on the edges here of the nebula, but most of it comes from HOO, so it was kind of a dynamic color combination. But this was my image that got shortlisted, and feels pretty good to see it on the big screen in London.
wow. Wow.
So the next section in the gallery is our solar system, which includes the sun and the moon. So over here on this left side of the wall, these are all the sun photos. And a lot of these are hydrogen alpha images. There's another one from Andrew here, classic, but I'll go through and talk about my favorites from this section. So this person, this image right here, this is from Miguel Claro in Portugal. And I've been following him for a fair amount. He seems to get some really good seeing where he is in Portugal. So he just gets a lot of very sharp hydrogen alpha images of the sun. This image is an image of the prominence on the side of the sun. And it's just very, very sharp, good detail, and just an overall really nice image. One of the biggest problems when you're doing H-alpha images like this is that doing the coloring is very hard because it's obviously from a monochrome camera. So you have to pick the colors yourselves. And picking tasteful colors is really, really hard when you're doing H-alpha images. And I just really like the colors of this one. I struggle a lot myself with getting perfect colors on the hydrogen alpha, but it's just very tasteful. Moving on, the winner in this category, this is also another one of my favorite images. This is a time lapse of a year on the sun by Soumyadeep Mukherjee. And it's just a really, really cool idea. And it takes a lot of patience to actually go out and shoot time-lapse images for every day throughout a whole year. But you can see the movement of the sunspots and how they develop and the way that this image has been stacked throughout a whole year. And it's just a really cool idea, and the level of patience that it takes to actually go out and do an image like this is pretty extreme. So, very cool. Another image I really liked in this category is from Cataline Beldea. I probably mispronounced that name really bad, but this is from one of the only solar eclipses that occurred this year. This one was over the southern Antarctic Ocean, December 4th, and this is just a really cool eclipse. You can see the actual curvature of the shadow of the moon. And this image, I think, is really tasteful because they've gotten a good amount of corona detail. It's not overly blown out. it's just very tasteful, very cool shot from a plane. I can definitely tell it being in Antarctica, it was really hard to actually get a telescope image for most people. I think only on Union Glacier people were able to capture images with scopes. So most of the images are probably only from a plane like this one, but very cool. So the next section in our solar system are just the moon images. So of these ones, we'll talk about some of my favorites. I really like the level of clarity here, and this moon mosaic by Andrea Vanoni. This looks like it was a 32 panel moon mosaic, which they're very tough to capture. You either need to automate it with software, or it's a very painstaking amount of actually trying to figure out where you are amongst the craters, which can be really hard to actually keep track. So any kind of moon mosaic with more than like 6 panels is a huge challenge, so very cool image. My other favorite image over here is by Lionel Magic. It's the full moon silhouetting a spider in its web, and I don't know why, but I really like images when people shoot spiders silhouetted in the moon. There are a couple out there, but this one was really, really well executed because typically focusing is a big problem in these images. So getting the spider in focus and getting the moon in focus and getting both exposed is impossible. So what you have to do is you have to focus stack. You have to take an in-focus image of the moon and an in-focus image of the spider. And he's also done an HDR image as well in order to get the moon to actually have a bit of detail on it. But it was pretty naturally blended as well. You can see it's not like he just dropped in his photo of the moon in a way that made it look unnatural. It was naturally blended in. I just really like seeing the moon with wildlife and images. So this photo, I don't know, I really like this one. All right, so this next section includes comets, planets, and the overall winner of the whole astrophotography competitions. This is a pretty exciting section, and some of my favorite photos in the whole thing are in here. So I'll start with this image here, taken by Lionel Magic. It looks like, I'm pretty sure he had another image in here somewhere, but this is the cosmic rose from Mayhill, New Mexico, and it's an image of comet 4P Phae amongst Lowers Nebula, or the red rose in Orion. And it's just a really cool image because he has the comet centered in the red rose, and it's just very tastefully edited. And it's a very unique moment. I mean, you can tell this is just an insane image. Very few people get images like this where comets are so perfectly framed. A lot has to go right, the weather, the moon, pretty much everything. So it's just a very, very cool image. Probably one of the best in here. I don't know, I might have selected it as overall winner, if not for Gerald Raymond's image of the disconnection event of Gerald Raymond's image of the disconnection event. I think this was Comet Leonard. I'm pretty sure this was Comet Leonard, but it doesn't actually say which comet this is. Yeah, it doesn't say which comet, so we're gonna guess. But this was a mosaic of 2 LRGB images captured with the 12-inch newt from Tivoli guest farm in Comas, Namibia. And this image, I'm sure many of you were aware of Comet Leonard when it passed near Christmas of last year. Almost nobody got pictures of it because, one, it was only visible from the southern hemisphere. There were very brief moments where it was in the northern hemisphere, but between clouds, the moon, and everything else, almost the only images that actually came out of this comet were from Comas, Namibia. This one from the Tivoli farm. So super rare because almost nobody got pictures of it, and this one is honestly a perfect image of the whole event. Doing a mosaic like this of a comet is super challenging because, one, it's moving amongst the stars, so you have to figure out how to plan the composition with the stars moving in the background. There'll be issues where you have to crop a lot on the edges because there's so much movement. The other issue is the actual movement in the ion tail while you're capturing. You only have a couple minutes to do the whole capture because the actual details in the tail are moving in real time. So there are like only a matter of minutes in which you can do a mosaic to get both parts of the comet, the ion tail and the nucleus, to where it's all the details are continuous and where they actually blend into mosaic. So it's just a very challenging image to capture and a very rare image of this comet because no one out there really got images of it unless they were in Namibia. And as well, the disconnection event on the comet just produced a lot of crazy details in the ion tail. So very cool, a very deserved winner in the whole competition. This next image, also in the solar system category, this is Ceres passing Aldebaran and from New Mexico skies in Mayhill by Lei Xin Wang. I think that's how you pronounce it, but this is just a really cool image showing the proper motion of Ceres around this really interesting nebula field. And the interesting thing that he did was he actually removed the stars on the image so you can more clearly see the actual motion of Ceres amongst the background dust. So it's just a really cool image seeing how things are moving in a whole background of nebula that you normally wouldn't see. And Ceres is even a very rarely imaged object as well. So it's very rare you'll see Ceres, and it's very rare that you see it with nebula in the background like this. So very creative image. Alrighty, so this next section is Nebulae and Stars, and this is where my image got shortlisted. But I already talked about my image, so I'll talk about some of the other ones in this category. One of my other favorite ones is over here. This is the Angel Nebula by Alpha Zhang from China. And this is like a really interesting part of the sky. It's like a dark reflection and emission nebula. I think that's in the constellation Monoceros, but it's right next to Orion. And it's just a really pretty spot that's really hard to get pictures of for most people. It's pretty low in latitude and it's quite dark. And this part of the sky also suffers from a lot of bright stars in the nearby region. So it's very tough to get images of it without internal reflection. Also, the moon goes right through this section. So it can be quite difficult to actually show the dark dust in this region, but if you can, there's a lot of interesting detail, and it's just a really cool spot. The other image here, the overall winner, is one of my other favorite ones. This is from Wei Tang Liang from China, the Eye of God. This was captured from Rio Hurtado, Coquimbo in Chile, probably from the Chilescope or Deep Sky Chile observatories. This is with a 20-inch Newtonian ASA DDM85. So I believe this one was from Chilescope, but it just shows the Helix Nebula, probably in a HOO or SHO palette, but it's got a lot of faint details, especially in the outer shells of the nebula. The hardest thing to do when you're imaging this nebula is to get these actual outer shells because they're so very faint, and they show up pretty well in this image, partially because it's such a fast telescope, but this image also has a really nice color palette. It's very nice. So a very nice winner to the category. So the next section over here is the youth section. So these are images taken by astrophotographers 16 years and younger. And I'm really sad that I can't submit to this category anymore because I got too old, but there are some excellent images in here. So my favorite ones in this category are this image of the Rosette Nebula by Sahil Sinha, 15-year-old in California, Santa Ana. This is a narrowband image, SHO, it looks like. Kept a bit of the green in there as well, so it's a bit more unique colors than what you would see in a normal rosette, but very good detail, very nice stars. Just a classic image. It's a really nice one. This is the winner of the category, another one of my favorite images. This is from Yang Hanwen and Zhou Zhezhen in China, both age 14. So these guys are really young. I was actually only 14 when I started astrophotography, so you can see people have progressed quite a bit. Even the younger ones. I've got some catching up to do clearly, but this is an image of the Andromeda Galaxy captured with the Skywatcher 150 7P. Looks like a Newtonian. It's got nice diffraction spikes, and it's just very rich in color. It's just a really pretty image of the Andromeda Galaxy. Color balancing it is quite difficult, as well as balancing the brightness in the core as well. But it's got a lot of great details out in the dust lanes, so very awesome image. Especially for someone so young. I wouldn't have been able to do that when I was 14. So very cool. So the next category is Best Newcomer. These are images captured by people who are into astrophotography for a year or less. So these are people who don't really have a lot of experience, but have produced still some very great images. So let's go look at this section. I really like this image from Dipten Nandi in India from Chile. This is the jewel box cluster. I've never actually imaged this before because it's in the southern hemisphere, but very pretty image. There's a lot of nice glow to it. I like adding a lot of glow to my astro images, so it's cool to see, a glowy star cluster. It's something that's very uncommonly shown in competitions or imaged at all, so cool to see a star cluster image. I also very like this image from Longden in China. This looks like a wide angle image of the Milky Way, but It has the same effect, the same glowiness around the bright nebulae. You can see a bunch of interesting ones outlined. There's NGC 7822, the elephant trunk, all the nebulae in Cygnus and Sagittarius are shown very clearly, and a lot of the bright stars have this nice glow around them. So it's very tastefully edited and a really awesome image, especially the color balance is very good for someone who's only into it for a year. So very awesome result from newcomers. So this is the galaxy images section, and there's a lot of good images here. This is kind of the most popular section I've noticed from just people walking around. A lot of people are just stopped looking at these images, and there's a lot of really good ones to talk about. I really enjoyed this one from Mark Hansen and Mike Selby from their 1 meter in Chile, and they've been pushing out a ton of great images constantly over the course of the last year, so it's no surprise seeing some of them here. But this is a ARP 271, a cosmic collision, a pair of galaxies that are in the process of actually merging. Probably these pairs are very seldom imaged, partially because they're in the southern hemisphere. So these guys have just been putting out a ton of really great work of galaxies that no one really looks at in the southern hemisphere, and these are no exception. This other image here, Jason Gwenzel, taken by my friend from Milford, Michigan, from a Celestron 8-inch Edge HD. So considering the odds and the conditions that he's shooting from, he's produced a very great image compared to everything else here. This is an Edge-on galaxy. I forget which NGC number this is. He didn't say in the description, so go make fun of him for not tagging the object. His Instagram is The Vast Reaches, but just a really impressive image with a ton of detail on this Edge-on galaxy that was created with a bunch of challenging conditions. It's not like he has a 1 meter, this is just a budget telescope that's only like $2,000. So very awesome. I really, really like this image also from Peter Ward in Australia using an RC16 telescope. This is M83, the galaxy that the band M83 is named after, and it's just a really cool galaxy because it's so rich in the colors. He's got a lot of nice HA light from the star forming regions as well as the blue, and it's just a very tastefully edited image overall. These images are very worth talking about. These are from my friend Akarsh Mishra, and I'm pretty sure he also worked with Michael Petrosco and Mur Evenden. But these are two images that show a lot of faint background tidal streams on two galaxies, the Sombrero and Messier 51. This image was the winner in the category because it shows this very, very faint section around the Sombrero galaxy, the tidal stream loops. So you can see on the southern and northern poles, there's these massive loops as well as a very large bubble around the Sombrero galaxy. And it's very, very difficult to see this stuff because it's so incredibly faint. So they did have quite a bit of help with a 16-inch f3 Newtonian in New Mexico. I'm sure that aided a lot in getting this faint stuff out, but I can tell you I've tried capturing it before, and it's seriously faint. It's very hard to edit and to actually pull out. It takes a ton of time. And the same is true of these faint regions here around M51 in this image. There's an absolute ton of dust and background galaxies pulled out that it's just a really huge challenge to see them because they're so faint. So these are two very awesome images from New Mexico, and one of them the winner. So very awesome. But that was the whole gallery. Every single section, my favorite photos from every section. I hope you guys enjoyed the tour of the gallery. Now we're going to go look at some of the telescopes, hopefully, at the Royal Observatory, and I'll show you guys some of those. So let's move on. So after stopping by the observatory exhibit, we went up to the prime meridian, which is at the Royal Greenwich Observatory. So this is actually the defining line between the eastern and western hemispheres. It's just an arbitrary line, and they decided to measure it from here because this is where they were doing science back in the day when, someone had to decide. They decided we're just going to do it right here. So that's where the meridian is, and you can go back and forth between the hemispheres. Some of the telescopes they use to measure transit times for objects to measure the actual meridian. I just thought their setups were a bit interesting because they had a nice reclining chair right by the eyepiece to actually look at objects. So super high-tech way of measuring transit times. But it was pretty cool to see. The funniest part was that the roof mechanisms they use are actually just doors, like hinged doors with these geared mechanisms to open up the doors. which I just thought was super fancy. You know, why not just build one single monolithic roof piece instead of having like 8 doors? But you know, this is how things were back in the day. So yeah, they actually do have a usable telescope on property. They have the Great Equatorial Telescope, which is a pretty old, large refractor. It was pretty interesting. The mount is very complex looking, and the scope is quite large, but the best part of all is that they actually have a feather touch focuser on the back for when they actually plan on using it. And I guess they use this for outreach still. They had some live streams up of Jupiter and the moon, so that's pretty neat. I guess it suffers from a lot of chromatic aberration though, because it's a big refractor. But that was the whole observatory. I hope you guys enjoyed this tour, and I'll see you all in the next video.